Welcome to Huddle Up with Matthias Bueno. Today's guest is professional basketball player Emily Potter. Emily, thanks for being on today's episode. I'm really glad that we're able to talk basketball today. This is going to be awesome.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
So halfway across the world right now, you're in Brno in Czech Republic. What has life been like in Eastern Europe as compared to Winnipeg?
Yeah, I actually really love the Czech Republic as a country. It's a really beautiful place. The people are nice, and this is my second year here, so it kind of feels like home. Obviously, with the pandemic, I've pretty much seen the inside of my apartment and the gym this year. So not having that travel aspect when you are in Europe kind of sucks, because I could be anywhere right now. I might as well be in Winnipeg, right? Because I'm not doing a lot besides just playing basketball. But life is good, and I'm very thankful to have a job.
Well, it's definitely important to be able to make some sort of income, have something to do, keep busy. And I've heard a lot of great things about the city of Prague and Czech Republic, and even just across Central and Eastern Europe in general. A very underrated part to travel to explore. It must be nice to at least be in a place where there's so many things that you're not as familiar with, even though you've been there for 2 years, as when you're back home and you hear all the people who are from out of Winnipeg always raving about the Forks, but we don't really take too much stock into how important it is as compared to visiting some of the beautiful structures. What are some of the nicest places you've been to in Czech Republic, at least in your time there so far?
Yeah, I think it's amazing in Europe. Everything's so close. So driving across the whole country will take you maybe 4 hours, whereas obviously, Canada is huge, and it's just really hard to kind of wrap your head around that size when you are from Europe. And now I kind of understand that being here. At Brno, I'm 2 hours away from Prague, but I've been there many times, and it's one of my favorite cities in the world. I'm also 2 hours away from Vienna in Austria. So you can take a train either way and really just spend the day there and see so much. And yeah, there's so many other places that I've been in Europe as well, like Budapest. It was only a 5-hour, bus ride away. And if you have, a day or two off, you can totally make the most of it and see some amazing things. And it's like you're not learning history through the history book. You get to actually see it. And I'm a big fan of, museums and walking tours and those kinds of things. So I love being able to learn the history. And there's just so many more hundreds of years of, history of people being in Europe than there is in Canada. So I think that's just the history is super amazing, and the architecture, I love it all.
Especially with how long Europe has been around, and when people study Western European history in North America, there's just an endless amount of information that you could learn, let alone when you're actually there on the scene. So was Europe the main place that you wanted to hopefully play professional basketball when you finished here in Winnipeg? Or what were, or when you were finished playing collegiate basketball, was Europe the main spot you had in your mind, or wherever an opportunity would present itself as where you would go?
Yeah, so obviously the WNBA is, everybody's dream. That's the league in America. It's very, very tough to get on a team there. There's only 12 teams of 12 women. Other than that, there's so many countries around the world that do have leagues. You could play in Asia, Australia, and Europe. Those are usually, the main destinations. But I definitely wanted to, experience Europe and be able to travel. And it's just such a unique experience of being so close to all those other countries. So I'm definitely happy that I'm in Europe, and I get to have such just a unique experience playing basketball, but being able to see the world at the same time. It's kind of, the best of both worlds. And I'm already here. So, you gotta take advantage of it and try to see what you can.
Now, you mentioned the WNBA, which, if anything, could be harder for people trying to get in, especially considering that there's less teams. The NBA is already super difficult as it is, but there's less teams in the WNBA and less players on each team. So what does it really look like for women who are playing at the collegiate level in the United States to get in? How difficult truly is that path into the WNBA?
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. So every year their draft is 3 rounds of 12 players. So they're drafting 36 people every year. Unless you're a first round pick, I don't think you're guaranteed. So that's, the first 12. And obviously you have the 36 people drafted. They'll bring in free agents, bring in other people that are not fresh out of college as well. That could be, free agents. So I end up signing as a free agent to a training camp contract and had that experience in Seattle. And I mean, yes, it's very competitive. You go from playing collegiately and in the WNBA, when you make that jump, and all of Europe, it's not just people aged 18 to 22 anymore. It's now 22 to 36, 38, 40 years old, right? So you become that very small fish in the big pond again. But it's always exciting to take that step to the next level and see, I guess, kind of where you stack up. But yeah, so 36 players drafted every year out of college. They always usually draft a couple Europeans as well. They're starting definitely to draft more Europeans. And from there, you still have to head to training camp and fight your way onto the roster of 12 people.
Oh my goodness. And even just to think, only a few years ago, the NBA started to expand their roster size with creating the strong relationship between the G League affiliates of each team, whereas the WNBA isn't quite there yet in terms of that possible expansion of the roster. So I want to get more into, you mentioned signing as a free agent for training camp in Seattle. What was that experience like? Because for the listeners out there who may not be as familiar with the strength of some of the teams, Sue Bird, who's one of the greatest WNBA players, has played on Seattle for ever and ever. I remember even when I was a kid and reading books about basketball that she was still there, and she still is after all these years. So what was that experience like in Seattle?
Yeah, that was a crazy experience. It was a pretty whirlwind time after I finished my senior year in college. I, went through the process of hiring an agent, and she worked really hard on my behalf, to get me a couple different potential options, and ended up going to Seattle on a training camp contract. And that was, kind of my first taste of playing professionally. And it was an amazing experience. Just to see how, all the women hold themselves, how it is your job now. It's not just you're playing in college, you're playing in school. It's actually your job. So it can feel like, there's more pressure in the situation, but everyone was super welcoming. And I was just like, I need to pinch myself because like Sue Bird's on the same court as me, and she's saying, like, trying to give me tips and feedback. And it was, a super awesome experience that I'll definitely never forget. And, I didn't end up making the final roster, but I still, loved the experience. I wouldn't change it.
So when you're in the midst of an experience like that, and with the multitude of professional athletes I've spoken to, especially in a sport like football, where there's millions of people trying to get into the NFL, CFL, in a moment where you're at Seattle Storm's training camp, you really don't have time to pinch yourself because you're focused on trying to make the team, but then balancing the act of also enjoying the experience and really taking it in, I'm sure it can be a bit difficult. So what were some of the hardest things that you had to adjust to once the Bullets were flying at 100 miles an hour and training camp was kicked off?
Yeah, I think the speed of the game is definitely much quicker when you head to the pros. In college. And in the States, at least, we use a 30-second shot clock, but luckily I had that experience playing in Canada and FIBA, where we do use a 24-second shot clock, but it's always a little bit of an adjustment to get back into that. Those 6 seconds make a big difference. It's definitely also a lot more physical, just the strength of everybody. You're not just facing maybe one strong person. Everybody across the board is in top shape, as strong and fast as they can possibly be. And they say that you don't, kind of hit your peak for women's basketball until you're maybe like 27 or 28. You've grown into your body. I know me being a really tall athlete, it took me a while to grow into my body and feel like I can actually, reach my potential strength wise and, speed wise and all of that. So everybody at the next level is pretty much there. So that's a big jump. But after I finished college, I definitely told myself that I wanted to have fun while I was playing. So I went into the Seattle Storm training camp really wanting to enjoy the experience and not put any pressure on myself. And I'm really glad I did that, because it made the experience a lot more fun and made it a lot easier to play freely as well.
And that's a great thing you did. And especially considering how hard I've seen other people go on themselves when getting to professional training camps, and especially in a sport like basketball. It's, if anything, I would argue that it might be tougher because there's way more people playing the sport internationally, and there's way less opportunities at the highest professional levels, being NBA and WNBA. So after that experience in Seattle, was it a quick transition to Europe, or what was the timeline like between going to Storm training camp and getting to Czech Republic to play in Brno?
Yeah, so this was 2018 when I was with the Seattle Storm, and makes me feel old saying this. This is now my third year being overseas. So throughout the summer, you know, you have to figure out where you're going to sign overseas. And it's not, obviously not like college. You don't get to take any official visits. You don't get to see anything beforehand. You just kind of get on a plane and you go there, and the manager will pick you up, bring you to your apartment, and it's like, hey, you're here. So it's a pretty crazy experience. You have to have a lot of faith just, you know, in yourself and be able to be a very independent person. My first year in 2018, I ended up playing in Poland, and the last 2 years I have been in the Czech Republic. So yeah, it's been, I guess, a long but short 3 years. And now I finally feel like I can almost call myself, I guess, a veteran of playing professionally in Europe overseas.
So there's one thing that I've become familiar with in terms of what is a big, important component of playing basketball from someone like yourself, that I've had a handful of discussions with other guests who have had tons of different things to say. And especially during a time like this, where we're living in during the uncertainty of a global pandemic, and when different places across the world are experiencing it differently, the thing that people are starting to realize in their life that's important now, which is unfortunate in a way, is mental health. And I know that you're a big advocate of it, and that you've done a lot of work related to advocating for its importance in terms of how it compares to physical health, because they should be on par. But it's unfortunate that we don't always get that level of importance placed on mental health. So when did you really become a strong advocate for mental health, and what has that experience been like so far?
Yeah, it was definitely my senior year when I started to, you know, take mental health seriously. And that was, you know, through my own struggle and the struggle of others. And I don't think it should take somebody, you know, personally struggling to then learn about mental health and become aware about it. It needs to be taught early, it needs to be taught often. I know when I was growing up, I wasn't learning about it in school. It wasn't something that was covered in health class or science class or anything like that. Whereas, you know, we might talk about, you know, the body and physical injuries. How you treat mental health is not going to be the same as how you treat physical health and physical injuries. So I'm, you know, very thankful for the resources that I personally had when I was in college, like having a sports psychologist on staff. But I know that's still not something that's true for every athletic program and every team. Not just for, you know, mental performance, because I did have experience, you know, talking to kind of like psychologists about how I could be the best player I could be. How am I going to maximize, you know, my time on the court and focus on what I need to focus on and be mindful on the court so that I'm not dwelling on the past. That stuff's all great for, you know, having a psychologist and a mental coach. But I think we often forget that there is a whole person behind the athlete as well. And that mental health is just as important as physical health. And you can't be healthy without either, you know, half of the pie.
What was the most challenging thing that you dealt with during your time playing at the collegiate level when you were I believe it was Utah, correct?
Yeah.
What was the most challenging thing you had to deal with during your time playing for the Utes?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely put it, you know, I think they were equally challenging times, you know, struggling with my own mental health and reaching out for that, but also tearing my ACL my sophomore year as well. So I had, you know, the physical injury and the mental injury. And I don't think I can put, you know, one above the other, because they both changed me in a lot of ways, but I learned, a lot throughout the process as well.
Now, an ACL injury in sports is one of the worst things that could happen to someone physically. What was the recovery journey like for you, and how did you handle living each day knowing that it takes a long time to recover an ACL?
Yeah, definitely. It was a very long process. I ended up tearing it in the fall, right before we were about to start practice, and had my surgery in October. So I didn't get to play, another game until a year later. Worked my way back, but having that full year meant I didn't have to rush through any of my rehab, and I could really make sure that I was feeling my best. And it's very scary because it happens in a half a second, right? I'm going for a layup and no contact, and my knee just kind of folds and snaps on me. So it could be really scary to work your way back from that, because obviously you might be in your head that what's preventing this from happening again, right? But for me, this was just my own way I approached it. Is I just didn't think about it as soon as I stepped on the court. I had to just trust in all of the hours, hundreds of hours that I did of rehab, because I was there for it. I was present. I knew all the work that I did, and I knew that it had got me back to a place that I was healthy. I didn't end up wearing a brace because I didn't want any reminder of that injury. I just wanted to be on the court and enjoy playing basketball again. And it ended up working out for me. Who's to say when you're going to get injured? You can't kind of go around in a bubble, I guess. And so now for sure my mindset has changed, that every single practice I'm trying to have fun on the court, and every single game I'm trying to play my hardest, because you truly do not know when it could be your last game, whether it's an injury or a pandemic, canceling your season. It just makes you realize how, precious time on the court is. And yeah, you can't play basketball forever. So I'm just trying to enjoy it while I can.
That's a very important thing you mentioned there at the end, to enjoy it, especially when you don't know when it could be over. And for so many out there, you never know how long you may be able to live the dream, so to speak, or how long the opportunity may be around, or if the opportunity even comes. So now that you're in more of a living in the moment mindset, how does that translate to handling what's happened during COVID with basketball season being canceled and then not knowing when the next opportunity is to step on the court? What are the kinds of things that have kept you busy or focused on the present rather than worrying about when basketball may return or how long it's going to stay around when it returns?
Yeah. So when season first got shut down, in March, it was very quick, right? It was kind of like pack your stuff and head home, quarantine, stay away from people. And it didn't really give me a lot of time to process it at first. And it has been very difficult. It's been, a mentally challenging year, just with the length of how long a lot of athletes have had to just kind of stop and slow down. At the same time, I think there have been benefits for, a lot of people who are used to go and never having a break. I definitely do enjoy my downtime, and I loved being able to spend time with my family. So I think that's what really made the process a lot easier for me, was that I was able to spend the whole summer at home with my family, and I, normally wouldn't have as much time with them. So I'm very thankful for that. But at the same time, it's scary having to completely adjust your training and still hoping that you're going to get to the same place that you were before. So I wasn't able to get on a basketball court every day. I wasn't able to get into the gym for months at a time. So I had to, do a lot of home workouts, and you just have to have faith that, there's more than one path to get to the place of success that you want to be. Just because, somebody's doing it this way does not mean that you need to do it the exact same way. You could do it the exact same way and you still might not end up with those same results. So you have to trust what's going to work best for you, for your body, for your mind, and hope that you'll get there. And I think all of my, workouts, home workouts, everything I did over the summer really paid off when I did get the opportunity to come back here to the Czech Republic, because I really didn't know if I would or not.
And success, you mentioned that perspective on success, that there's multiple paths to to get to the same destination. Did you have a different mindset on it before, or how did you grapple with this change in thinking due to COVID?
Yeah, I think a lot of time athletes and people these days really get stuck on the idea that you need to grind 24/7. You always need to be working overtime. And, Kobe's one of the greats, and I'm not taking anything away from him. Could never. Rest in peace, Kobe. But he was just a workhorse. Unbelievable work ethic, and the amount of time that he put in was just amazing. And it made him great. But if I were to do that, it would make my body fall apart. So it worked for him. That's amazing. But what I've learned, through COVID and through my injuries is that sometimes less is more. And that's just my own, personal, I guess, how I approach things, because I know that as I age, as I get older, I probably have less miles left in my body than on the other side that I have already, ran and trained and played through. Probably less basketball games left than I have to look forward to. So it's not just about also the physical of how you're training. It's everything all encompassing: your sleep, your eating, all of that really boring stuff that I did not pay attention to or think seriously about when I was younger. And even in college, I was like, oh, I'll eat a cheeseburger the day before a game. I'll be fine. But now I'm like, you know what? Eating good makes me feel good. And I want to, fuel my body like a machine and be the best I can. So yeah, COVID, I think, probably forced that on a lot of people, but I think hopefully it's helped a couple people more than it's hurt them to realize that you can get things done with less than you thought you could.
There's a lot of great things you touched on there, and familiar experiences that I've had in sports related to that phrase, less is more. And when I played football, I met one of the smartest minds, I could argue the smartest mind in the world of kicking and punting that there is across the border between Canada and America. Don Sweet, a legendary kicker in the CFL, played for the Montreal Alouettes in the 70s. And when I met him, he just watched me kick and didn't really say much. And then as I got to know him more and more over the several years that we started working together, he'd always say these little phrases that have stuck with me since. And one of the ones that he said that, I could have it like tattooed on my chest, I never forget it. He'd always say to us, less is more. Big bucket versus small bucket. When you go out to hit some golf balls, you're going to go hit 100 balls as hard as you can. No, because you're going to get tired. You're going to develop bad habits. Whereas when you go with the small bucket, then you're focused on making every rep count and going through the entire process. And I can hear a lot of those similarities in what you're talking about with less is more related to your body as well, you mentioned, because that is a thing that I'm sure people would experience is, oh, I can eat McDonald's, or I can eat BK, or I can eat whatever it is the day before a game. That's not a big deal, or once in a while is okay. But this time of COVID has definitely made people realize like it's not something over time that is sustainable. And then again, you mentioned Kobe and Michael Jordan. They're crazy, not in a bad way, but they're insane. Like Michael Jordan is literally a psychopath when it comes to success. And I'm not taking away anything from his career, because I still think that he's the greatest player to have ever lived in the world of basketball. You could argue with LeBron. Yep. But you look at the way in which LeBron has been able to, the level of production that he's been able to maintain with training hours, etc., like taking care of his body, all sorts of things. Whereas Michael and Kobe were just that much more crazy. Like, I'm sure if you've watched The Last Dance, all the things that he talked about, whether it was the mental game, physical game, everything he did, the stories of his dad dismissing him and him wanting that approval and that validation it drove him crazier. Or the little things like they're going to dinner a night during the week of the NBA Finals in '96, and George Karl doesn't look at him and, oh, I see how it is. That's fine. And then just plays a little game in his head. So those are some of the things
He takes it personally.
The greatest meme that ever came from the documentary. Yeah. I took that personally. And that's one of the concepts I found so interesting about the greatness that Kobe and Michael were able to achieve. And especially I read it in Tim Grover, who was was both their trainers, read it in his book, Relentless, talking about how insane they were. And sometimes that's what it takes to maintain that level. But like it also talks about in that book, it's not for everybody. And you even just said it yourself. Like, could you imagine if you had to play mind games every time someone looked at you wrong, or that every single time that someone sloughed you off or whatever, you'd be like, and I took that personally, and you just went crazy and you just became a maniac. Like, I couldn't imagine like what someone's mental health would be like, or even how Michael and Kobe made Hall of Fame careers and didn't just explode and burn out.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, they are one in a billion type athletes, basketball players, and people for sure. And, you know, it could be different for everybody, but I know for me, that's not sustainable for me, because I want to be more than a basketball player, because like I said, you never know when it could be taken away. And I can't have my whole identity in basketball anymore, because at some point I will have to retire. And basketball is what I do. I love it so, so much. I still am not, you know, not at the point that I want to retire. I still have no idea how that's going to look for me and how I would even handle it when I have to retire. But I hope that when I do get to that point, I'll be able to walk away from the game and know that, you know, Emily's more than a basketball player, and I won't, you know, mentally struggle with that too much.
And another thing that you mentioned there about what you do versus who you are, two different concepts that oftentimes I see this a lot, or I've seen it a lot in football, because that is like, it's such an intense game, physically, mentally, emotionally, not to take away from other sports like basketball or soccer, but from how insane sometimes guys and girls who play have to be to be on that level of being on it. It consumes part of your identity. And one of the wisest things I think I've learned in this podcast was from a former guest, Angus Reid, who he did a TED talk in West Vancouver about why we need high school football. And he's such a brilliant, brilliant speaker. And he's such a big advocate for, it doesn't matter what you do, matters how you do it. Because with him dealing with retirement, and even the first time I met him in Vancouver Island, him talking about his transition out of football, and as a lineman, you're carrying so much weight, more than a person should be regularly at that height, is trying to find the ways to transition smoothly and not go, I'm the king of the world and I'm a baller and I'm this and I'm that. And then all of a sudden, well, people only associate you with, you know, Emily Potter, she's just that great basketball player. Oh, you know, this person was just that great soccer player, football player, but that's not technically who you are anymore. And that holding on to that identity again creates an even worse mental health crisis, because now you can't get that out of your head that you're just this person that is valuable on a court, on a field, on the ice. So what are some of the things that you want Emily Potter to be known for when you're done playing basketball?
Yeah, I think, well, for me personally, growing up around sport, I've learned all of my major life lessons and you know, made all my friends basically through sports. But at the same time, so many of those skills and lessons I've learned are so transferable off the basketball court. So I don't think we should sell ourselves short, you know, being a part of a team, and whether you're in a team sport or not, you know, all the lessons you learn on just perseverance and, you know, monitoring yourself, time management, just goal setting. There's a billion things, and those are all going to serve me for after basketball as well. And like you said, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. So I just, you know, I'm focused on having, you know, important relationships through basketball, and hoping that those, you know, will help me after basketball, the connections I have made, and that, yeah, I can be a great person. I don't have to do anything exciting. I don't have to be famous. I don't have to win championships, win medals to be a good person. I can just be a good person in my everyday life, be there for my family members, be there for my friends, and enjoy my life and just try to show a lot of love. And I think that's enough. I think that's what it, you know, all comes back down to. And it's very hard not to put your worth in your accomplishments and what you do. But, you know, if you haven't started yet, there's any time is a great time to start to try to branch out and ask yourself what you like about yourself, what you're good at that has nothing to do with your sport.
So another thing that I know that you've gotten into with the aspect of mental health is the Sarah Strong Foundation, the fundraisers, and the calm coloring that I believe that you had, the books that you had started to produce. So talk a bit about what got you onto that and why finding something that is calming mentally is important. And even if it's just coloring or drawing or writing, what really created that for you?
Yeah, it started last year when I was overseas. I was just, kind of mentally struggling, and a lot of time your mind can get running and it's hard to shut it off, whether, you can't sleep at night, or, your mind it's almost like it's playing tricks on you, which is really hard. You trust your mind to give you the right information, good information. And sometimes your mind has a mind of its own, right? And it's hard to separate the facts from what's not. So a way for me to shut off my brain became using coloring books. So I brought a couple with me overseas, and then it got to the point where I was spending maybe an hour a day coloring. I'd color a picture every day. And I filled up a couple books, and my mom actually gave me the idea. She's like, well, why don't you make it yourself? I spent all this time using coloring books and had been like therapeutic for me. It'd be a way for me to calm my overthinking mind and just focus on the page, turn on some music and be my own little time just for myself. So I spent the second half of the season designing my coloring book. And then over the summer, I was able to get it produced and sold it, across, mainly Manitoba, a little bit around Canada, some to the US, and use that money to form a couple mental health scholarships. So I'm really proud and happy that we were able to do that and award 2 scholarships to very deserving women across Canada for their post-secondary education. So it was definitely, a fun experience. I learned a lot about how much it takes to, get something into production. And I thought, if it helped me, that maybe it could help some other people too.
Wow, that's incredible. And like they say, there's nothing that's more rewarding than giving back to someone who can't really do as much in return for yourself right there in that moment, but there's no price tag you can put on the experience and the memory you've created for those women, to have given them an opportunity to help with their college fund or university fund, and especially through something that was so important and therapeutic for yourself. That's just incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been, an interesting ride. And every year we try to come up with new fundraisers and ways to raise money. And this is our first year having this scholarship in honor of, the fundraiser. The foundation is called Sarah Strong. It's named after my friend Sarah, who passed away. So hopefully we can make this scholarship an annual thing for sure.
So I want to ask you, who growing up were some of your biggest role models, whether it be in sport, playing basketball, or whether it be a family member, or whether it be somebody that was completely unrelated to sports or your close family?
Yeah, I think it definitely, started with my family. I'm very, very close with my family. I have 2 older sisters who also played basketball. My dad coached when I was growing up. So, since I was 5 years old, I was in the gym with him a lot. He would be coaching junior high at my elementary, junior high school. And I would just be running around the gym, eating snacks, playing on those little plastic scooters. And I never really started playing basketball till I was in grade 7. I always knew I wanted to because, my family members had. But it just kind of really took off for me as soon as I started. I was not very good, but I definitely knew that that's, what I wanted to do. Ever since I was little, I would watch, basketball with my dad, watch March Madness. And I was like, I want to play in the NCAA. Like that's what I want to do. And yeah, my family, they've given me so much. Even if, we didn't have tons, I never felt like I went without growing up. They made every dream that I had for any of the billion different sports I wanted to play, come true, and always supported me. And I know that if I decided to quit basketball tomorrow, their love for me wouldn't change. They just want what's best for me. They want me to be happy. And, that takes a lot of pressure off me as well. When you have supportive people like that in your life that also agree that it's not about your accomplishments, it's about being a good person. And they're always going to be there for me, whether I score 40 points or I have 7 turnovers in a game, right? Like, they don't care about any of that. They're the ones that are waking up at 5 a.m. to watch a game that's in the Czech Republic with the time change. My mom, has rarely ever missed any of my games. She's always there watching. My sister screaming. She always tells me that she's going to scream so loud that I can hear her here in the Czech Republic. So I'm very thankful for my family, and I've always, looked up to them. And I think I've gotten all my best qualities from them for sure.
And the one thing you mentioned that I really liked was you could quit basketball tomorrow and they'd still love you for who you are. And that's sometimes that is a discerning quality in people who tie the value of their children, whether it be football, basketball, soccer, volleyball, to their success, their accomplishments, their identity, playing pro, etc. And just the general acceptance and love of no matter what it is you're doing, but who you are as a person is honestly something that means that you've succeeded no matter what, because you're still able to be a good person and do what you want to do without worrying about people pressuring you or bullying you into doing things that you wouldn't want to for the sake of keeping up appearances or keeping up some sort of reputation.
Yeah. And I think, my parents loving me if I quit basketball is huge. But another thing I'd have to ask is, am I still loving myself the same, even if I can't play basketball? And I think that's a question that a lot of athletes will need to ask themselves and try to get to that point. I'm going to make peace with it that you do, love yourself just as much as your parents do, right? I think we're all very critical of ourselves. But I don't think there's anybody in the world that loves me more than my mother loves me. And I need to show that same love to myself.
Absolutely. And it's a serious question. How do people handle when they're finished playing high level sports? What do you say to yourself in the mirror? What do you think? How do you feel day to day? And any person who's finished playing high level sports will know it's almost like the first time that you really die. Not that you're physically not living, but that life of waking up early, going to bed early, sometimes long nights, hard workouts, tough games, great lessons, great wins, tough losses, etc. That all just vanishes. And with each passing day, it becomes a more and more distant memory that can't really be revived. So that for sure is definitely one of the toughest questions that people would have to ask themselves when they're done playing high level sports, because it doesn't last forever. And even if you play and keep it going and drag it on till you're 40 or what have you, it still is eventually going to come to an end. And that's a really, really hard thing to grapple with.
Yeah, 100%. It's very true what you said. It's, you're not dying, but it's the death of, maybe the life as you know it and the beginning of a new life. Not to say that your new life is going to suck without sport, but it's so different. And when you've been doing it for, I've been playing basketball now for over half of my life. I can't really remember, and I don't know what life is like without it. And I've seen, my college teammates and other people I know, end their careers, whether it be after college, after playing pro for a little bit. And it's really hard. And I do not have the answers, not yet, for how to really go through that process. But I think it's definitely something that's important. And you need a lot of support from people who understand it, and even, mental health help if you need it. And I hope, and I pray that when I do retire, it'll be because I'm ready to be done with the game and not because of, injuries or any other extenuating circumstances that, take me away from the game. But until then, I really have to play every game like it's my last. You just giving that whole speech makes me want to play basketball for the rest of my life. I'm like, oh my God, I don't ever want to quit.
Well, there is one funny thing that I think of when it comes to holding on to the dream. And for those who remember, or for those who don't, growing up as a kid, sometimes, you know, you hang out with your grandparents or what have you. People will love watching WWE wrestling, super ridiculous, over the top. And it's all a show, very entertaining. But there's one specific wrestler that I always think of when people talk about holding on to the dream, is Ric Flair and his famous speech that he gave in the mid 2000s, even though he still kept going after that, showing up to the arena in Charlotte, North Carolina, and talking about how there comes a time when you have to retire, and then said that he had to announce to everyone that he will never retire. And then everyone went crazy. And I always think back to that moment and used the memes tons, and I've used it tons, where people want to keep hanging on and they keep it rolling. Tom Brady, Dirk Nowitzki, Vince Carter, and the years just keep tacking on and they're just let it ride. But there comes that point where you do have to let go. And I think that's one of the hardest things about falling in love with sports is you can't love without there being pain, no matter what. And there eventually will come that time where you have to cross the bridge of pain in order to have truly lived a loving experience of playing high level sports, especially professional basketball. So I don't mean to, maybe egg you on to keep it rolling till you're 50, but I've been very fortunate to have learned from lots of really smart people, players, football, basketball, soccer. And when it ends, it sucks. No one likes to stop playing high level sports, and people want to keep it rolling, but there's so much more on the other side than people realize. And I think that's one of the hardest leaps of faith that you'll have to take, is trusting who you've become as a person because of sports, to know that you'll make your life even better after it's done.
100%. You just got me fired up with all that. I 100% agree. Yeah.
So we're getting towards the end of our time here. I wanted to ask you a few more wrap-up questions before we go. Just some fun questions for the listener to really enjoy and end at a lighthearted note here. So first question I have is, what is the most memorable basketball game that you've ever watched professionally as a fan?
Ooh, memorable game that I've watched. I think when Kawhi hit that corner three to win the series in the playoffs. I think that was, a super cool moment that I was, actually watching. And I hope that, that continues to get replayed and I can look back on it and be like, I remember exactly where I was when that happened.
Favorite basketball player ever?
Ooh, that's a really hard one. Oh, ever. I'll go with, male player. I'll go with Michael Jordan. I'm definitely an MJ fan, and not really growing up during his era, after watching The Last Dance made me appreciate him a whole lot more.
What is the best game that you've ever played in your career?
Oh, best game I've ever played in my career. I mean, you could say that like in high school, when I think I was like, who even knows, like winning the provincial championship my grade 11 year. I think I had like 20 points, 20 rebounds, something stupid like that. But I don't know if I can really count high school as that. Maybe like I'd probably pick a college game in Utah. Utah's big rival is BYU, right? We got Utah, BYU about an hour away from each other. They call it the Holy War because BYU is, primarily people of the LDS faith, and Utah is more of a public type university. And they just really ramp it up really don't like each other. So whenever we played them in rivalry games was always, super fun time. And my freshman year, I remember playing and they had a 6'7" post on the other team. So I'm like 6'5", and I was like, wow, this is going to be a crazy game. And we ended up winning in double overtime, and just celebrating that with my team was super fun.
What's the best game that you've ever watched in person?
Oh, in person. It's got to be a Utah game for sure. Maybe like a men's game. I'm trying to think what's a specific. I'm going to go with another, like another BYU rivalry with the men's team. I can't remember what year it was, but there was about 2 or 3 people ejected from this game for trying to fight each other between Utah men's basketball and BYU men's basketball. And both teams were very good that year. I think that might have been a year that, Utah went to the Sweet 16, and they ended up, squeezing out that win, and, a super packed arena with like 10,000 of us. So that was pretty crazy.
If there was one celebrity that you could sit down and have a 5-minute conversation with, who would it be and why?
Ooh, celebrity. Ooh. That is a really, you're giving me so many options to choose from. This is crazy. How am I ever going to decide? I think I would choose somebody like probably like an Oprah or Shonda Rhimes. I really like Shonda Rhimes and just everything that she has accomplished. I have to choose, a super powerful woman to sit down with and talk to, for sure.
And the last question, if you were to have any occupation that was not related to sports, what would it be and why?
I like to think that if I wasn't an athlete, I would dedicate a lot more time to my schooling. So when I was younger, I definitely, had dreams of potentially being a lawyer or maybe even a doctor. So I think I would try to really pursue something in those realms. Yeah.
And be cast to be one of the main characters on Suits, right?
Yes. Love that. Love that show.
Well, Emily, that's the end of our time here today. I've had such a fantastic conversation with you, and I've really enjoyed everything we've talked about. It's just really been an absolutely marvelous time.
Yes. Thanks so much for having me. It was a great time. Super fun.
Well, everyone, thank you for listening to today's episode with professional basketball player Emily Potter.